The idea that Trump and my Republican colleagues want to restore integrity and security in the visa process is actually a joke. Let me be clear, integrity is not snatching lawful visa holders off the streets and throwing them into unmarked vans. Integrity is not revoking visas based on social media posts that hurt somebody's little feelings because kids decide that they want to go after Trump or this administration. We have a thing called free speech in this country. And since we're talking about integrity, I'm confused as to why my Republican colleagues aren't talking about the lack of integrity when it comes to the president's family's visas.
Despite Republican preoccupation with immigrants, how they got here, and which of them should leave, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett brought up something that Republicans really don't like to talk about during a House Judiciary Committee hearing, and that was the fact that First Lady Melania Trump came into this country on an Einstein visa despite not demonstrably being an Einstein.
Let me remind y'all that Melania, the First Lady, a model, and when I say model, I'm not talking about Tyra Banks, Cindy Crawford, or Naomi Campbell level, applied for and was given an EB-1 visa. And what that stands for is an Einstein visa. Now, y'all that don't know, let me tell you how you receive an Einstein visa. You're supposed to have some sort of significant achievement, like being awarded a Nobel Peace Prize or a Pulitzer, being an Olympic medalist, or having other sustained extraordinary abilities and success in sciences, arts, education, business, or athletics. Last time I checked, the First Lady had none of those accolades under her belt. It doesn't take an Einstein to see that the math ain't mathin' here.
In response, Alex Naraste, the vice president of economic and social policy at the Cato Institute, spoke up to defend the First Lady as a recipient of this particular visa.
But I also want to defend Melania real quick. Not everybody could marry Donald Trump, and I think that's quite an achievement. So I think she deserves credit for that. Nobody up here could have done it.
You sure right, I couldn't do it.
So he's obviously joking, but I don't know. I say obviously, but we've heard more ridiculous justifications for the words and actions of Republican leaders from Fox News hosts or from the leaders themselves. And a lot of the time they are dead serious, so maybe not obvious, as I said. But Melania might have thought, out of sight, out of mind, because we haven't seen or heard from her in a very long time. Not that I think we necessarily need to. I don't know how much value she'd be able to bring to our current Democratic operation. After all, she is no Einstein. She's not much of anything, really. During Trump's first administration, Republicans praised Melania for her poise and eloquence and beauty. They dismissed the fact that she posed nude in her past as a model, despite the fact that they slayed Michelle Obama for indecency when she wore a sleeveless dress. Also, the eloquence that they celebrated from Melania was actually a plagiarized speech that Michelle had already delivered during her own turn as First Lady. And then there was this other angle that Melania was stuck there, trapped in a loveless marriage with a man that she could not escape, as though she had remained married to Trump against her own will. And personally, I never bought that, because she can leave if she wants to, and she is definitely benefiting from being married to someone like Donald Trump. But every time people look to her for signs of life, or even for signs of hope that maybe she could be the neck that turns her husband's orange head in a good direction, she proves several times over that she is either just as bad as he is, or she just doesn't care about anything happening in the world or to the American people. She practically told us as much herself. But speaking of First Ladies, what is going on with our Second Lady, Usha Vance? Usha, for the most part, tends to stay out of the spotlight, which is fine. Again, that is her prerogative. But Usha is the daughter of immigrants. She herself is the recipient of birthright citizenship, the same right that her husband is working to deny others just like her, just like me even. She is a woman of color. She's an Ivy League educated attorney, and up until now, she was a Democrat. When she married J.D. Vance, he was a never-Trumper. Her husband's pivot, not just to a Trump supporter, but to a Trump enabler and to his running mate, must have been very, very difficult for her, but we have no way of knowing because she doesn't seem to have much of a public voice of her own. The Usha Vance that this country knows as the Second Lady is timid and meek, and I'm inclined to believe that she wasn't always like that. At least by appearances, she has allowed herself to be diminished for the sake of her husband's career, and I suppose for money and proximity to power. She left her job as an attorney once her husband became Trump's running mate. But I would actually respect her more if she just came out in support of the administration that her husband is a part of and the man that her husband works for and represents. She certainly wouldn't be the first South Asian first generation or immigrant American I know to support Donald Trump. But she doesn't say anything because one can assume that she doesn't actually support Trump or his administration. And instead of being the voice of opposition, she just stays quiet because she cannot afford to speak out against her husband and his role. Well, in a rare television interview with, of all people, Meghan McCain, Usha let us in on how she may truly feel about being the second and potentially the first lady of this country.
There is a not so small chance that you could be our first lady in a few years. And I find that a very exciting potential, possibility. I wanted to know, is that stressful for you? Is it exciting? Is that something you think about? Is this something everyone is asking you everywhere you go?
Well, people do ask about it, but I guess the way 3 years ago, or maybe it was 4 years ago at this point, I had absolutely no intention of leading any sort of life in politics. It really is that rapid. And then when we moved our kids to school in this area, it was with no intention whatsoever of JD running for a new office. And so my attitude is that this is a 4-year period where I have a set of responsibilities and to my family, to myself, to obviously the country. And that's really what I'm focused on. I'm not plotting out next steps or really trying for anything after this. And in a dream world, eventually I'll be able to live in my home and kind of continue my career and all those sorts of things. And if that happens in 4 years, I understand. If that happens at some other point in the future, I understand. Just sort of along for the ride and enjoying it while I can.
Life can and often does take some very interesting twists and turns, but the twist in Usha's life is not one that I think I could personally contend with. Granted, she has 3 children with JD, and now they're a very public political power couple. It's not always so easy to just up and leave your husband, but I would argue that Usha's circumstances are extenuating unless, of course, she is actually on board with her husband's 180. The rest of the interview lobbed softball questions at the second lady, like how does she get enough protein in her vegetarian diet? What are her thoughts on fashion? And throughout the interview, which lasted an hour, Usha never said Trump's name. Usha has, in her capacity as second lady, done things like join her husband on his trip to Greenland. But what's more notable about her, and perhaps what's more perplexing about her, is the things that she doesn't do or doesn't say. She doesn't speak up for education despite having an academic background. She doesn't speak up for immigrants despite coming from an immigrant family. She really can't, can she? I guess it's good that she's not outwardly, vocally supporting the actions and policies of this administration, but really, that's not much to give someone credit for. But for someone who seemingly has no political ambition and certainly no interest in ever becoming the first lady, Usha has found herself in a position where she has to fill in for the actual first lady, who is often MIA. Earlier this month, Usha promoted a summer reading challenge which encourages children to read 12 books over the summer. Normally, the First Lady would spearhead something like this, but no one can find Melania. In a Fox News segment discussing the challenge, Usha seemed utterly uncomfortable about being on camera and speaking publicly. She seems unpracticed and inexperienced, and I don't blame her for being nervous or inexperienced. I too never sought to be on camera, and frankly, it is strange talking to a camera, but she doesn't seem like someone who wanted to be where she is today. Maybe I'm overthinking Usha, but it's just, I don't know, like she's just 2 or 3 years older than I am, but she has 3 kids. She went to Yale. She was a successful attorney, very impressive stuff. She's done all of these cool things. And now, while her voice is being muzzled, seemingly with her own consent, she still defiantly flaunts her gray hairs and unfilled lips amidst the MAGA-faced bleached blondes of the modern-day Republican Party. Every once in a while, whispers of her old or maybe even current self will accidentally come through. So I don't know, I still kind of hope to see signs of life from her, but I won't be surprised or even disappointed if they never come. I just have very low expectations of people these days. And in today's political climate, it is almost unforgivable to be compliant in any of what the Trump administration is doing, even if your compliance is your silence from a notable public political position. And I say almost because I do like to leave some room for forgiveness, but maybe one day Usha will surprise us all. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.